Hey guys, you are watching your anime world. How are you all? Please support to subscribe this channel for watching new interesting stories. So in this video, we will see fourth part, what if Deku's quirk turned him into a rabbit girl. Here is short summary. During the entrance exam, Izuku discovers that he does have a quirk. One that turns him into a rabbit girl. How will this affect his hero career? But before we start, if you want more stuff like this, then be sure to subscribe and like this video. And if possible, share this video with your friends. Now let's start the story. The villain attack at the USJ had been on the news for days, and for good reason. Such a thing had been as close as a scandal as it could be. Thus, Izuku did not expect to find himself in a car going out into the countryside. The villain invasion was still in his mind even after a week, and yet such memories felt surreal. In fact, he was still processing it all. Out the window, Izuku could see field after field of crops. The green scenery sure was a nice change of pace from the city, and the mountains had its own beauty, a stark contrast from buildings and streets. However, being stuck within a car for hours was less than pleasant. He needed to do something, and the peace of the boonies only made him more restless. He glanced to a side. To his right, his eyes found Ochako leaning back on her seat. Differently from Izuku, she appeared to be relaxing well enough, snoring and with some drool streaming down from her mouth. The person to her right was as much a source of surprise as concern. After all, Izuku wasn't sure he wanted to be cooped up with Bakugo of all people. Still, the blonde had remained subdued, his attention taken by the passing electricity posts and the countryside beyond the window. "Man, this place looks pretty neat, doesn't it?" Mitsuki asked from the driver's seat. "Oh, it's nice, I guess," Inko said on the co-driver's seat, looking outside. Differently from her blonde friend, Inko was looking nervous. Given where they were headed, it was understandable. "What do you think, kids?" Mitsuki asked. "I am glad we can leave UA," Izuku timidly said. "And straight to adventure, am I right?" Mitsuki replied, laughing. She glanced at her son. "Oi, what about you, Katsuki?" Bakugo just scoffed, glaring at the world outside. If Izuku had to guess, Bakugo probably had no intention of joining them on their trip. In fact, Izuku felt pretty confident Bakugo wouldn't have wanted to be anywhere near him or Ochako. Katsuki probably would have preferred to go with his father instead. "Man, is she still sleeping?" Mitsuki wondered, looking at Ochako through the rear view mirror. "She must have been tired," Inko commented. Izuku didn't doubt that. 2 days after the USJ incident, Aizawa and Maruko were miraculously cleared from the hospital and immediately got Class 1A to train and learn some self-defense. Not even when the students went back to their normal schedule did they stop. Izuku looked out, grimacing. All Might, differently from his homeroom teacher, was still missing in action. No one knew where he was or what he was doing. Maruko had pretty much taken over fundamental to heroics, alongside Aizawa. Needless to say, Izuku could only worry about his mentor, particularly because no one appeared to know what he was up to. Not even Maruko had any knowledge. Sadly, Izuku feared the worst, that All Might had been injured too grievously and would be forced to retire. Izuku felt his gut twist in a tight knot at the thought. The world wasn't ready for that. No, forget the world. Izuku wasn't prepared to see All Might retire. "Hey, Izuku, how are you holding up?" He pulled a smile for her mother, who looked rather panicky herself, although for different reasons. "I'm fine," Izuku said. Not that Inko would believe him. Hadn't it been for Aizawa and Maruko's intervention, Izuku was sure that his mother would have taken him out of UA. Luckily, his father had opposed such a thing, and Nezu had helped to bring Inko to reason. However, Inko hadn't stopped worrying. "If you want, we can call this trip off," Inko tentatively offered. "Nope, it's not going to happen," intervened Mitsuki. "You both are going to meet your extended family and I'll get to be at an entire colony of rabbit people." She smirked at her son. "How about it, Katsuki? Maybe you'll find a rabbit girl for you." Katsuki glared at his mother and, aside from growling and muttering, didn't reply. His mother, on the other hand, laughed, amused by her son's behavior. "I am not worried," Mom, Izuku told his mother. I am actually looking forward to meeting that side of the family. Speaking of which, where the heck is the entrance? Mitsuki wondered. She slowed down the car. They were at the side of a short mountain. To their left there were open fields and the foot of the mountain, to their right were tall trees on the slope towards the peak. Mitsuki glared at her GPS before she angrily tapped on it. She carried on for a while, adding a few curses to the mix. Inko and Izuku chuckled. Izuku had sincerely missed Auntie Mitsuki's fiery personality. It was a pity that Masaru had agreed to give her wife and son some time for themselves and had gone off with some school friends of his. I think that's the entrance, Inko said. Huh, Mitsuki replied, looking up from the GPS. She blinked, dumbfounded, at what she saw. Izuku and Katsuki leaned forward, only to stare with equal disbelief. A few dozen feet away, they saw an open wooden gate. However, what actually baffled them was the large wooden ark with rabbit paw prints and the two large statues of anthropomorphic rabbit people at each side of the gate. One was clad in an overall and the other in a dress, both of them looking as some kind of farmer couple. The rabbit iconography didn't end there, though. They are really proud of their rabbit quirks, huh? Mitsuki commented. You have no idea, Izuku said with a smile. Shin's father actually changed his surname to Usugiyama after he manifested the full rabbit mutation quirk and bought these lands afterwards to be away from the city. According to Shin, his father thought the countryside was better suited for their family. Katsuki commented with a derisive scoff, but didn't say anything, differently from his mother. Seriously? Huh? That's hilarious, cackled Mitsuki. Well, what are we waiting for? She drove over to the gate, took a turn and went straight in without hesitation. Wait, maybe we should confirm if this is the Usugiyama property. Inko spluttered. Why yes, this could be someone else's farm. Izuku stammered. It was unlikely, but that didn't stop the Midoriyas from worrying. Fortune favors the bold, Mitsuki laughed. In they went, deep into the property. The road that awaited them was little more than a long gallery of trees. However, once they made it past it, they came across a large open section of the forest. There, standing tall, was the Usugiyama estate. The correct word to describe the Usugiyama's house was manor. The building itself was huge, and painted white, with pitch-black tiled roof. With 3 floors, it spanned wide in both directions and had a massive garden of sorts, with a roundabout at the center for the cars. To a side, Izuku was able to see a large grass field on the slope of the mountain, and crops further away. There was already movement over there, no doubt his cousins, aunts and uncles, running around the grass field. Izuku's heart raced at the thought of his extended family. For so long, it had been mostly his mother and him, yet now there was this entire branch not far from Mustafu. Moreover, it was a rather large new section of his family. Mitsuki drove the car to the roundabout and parked right outside the manor. Izuku turned to Ochako, who kept sleeping, and gently tried poking her awake. All he got in response were mumbles of mochi and fluff. Izuku sighed before grabbing Ochako by the shoulders and shaking her up. I'm awake, slurred a groggy Ochako. Finally, the group of mothers and teenagers left the car, and just in time. A certain rabbit man was hopping around a corner. Once he spotted them, he grinned and hurried towards them. Behind him, hidden behind the corner of the large house, were an odd group of children, from normal-looking ones to those that were like Shin and Izumi. You made it, exclaimed Shin. He hopped over to the group and gave Inko a surprise hug. The poor chubby woman blushed, unsure how to respond, all while Mitsuki stifled her giggling. Dressed in dirty overalls, Shin then went to greet Izuku before he shook hands with the rest. An elderly woman showed up from behind the corner, shooing the children away, and went towards them with a polite smile. She had gray hair and a few wrinkles, but other than that she looked rather young. She was petite, though, nearly as tall as Inko herself. Greetings, dears, the woman said. Inko, Izuku, this is my wife, Aina, said the rabbit man. Now both Midoriyas felt rather awkward. This was the woman who had his husband taken advantage of. However, Aina received them with a warm smile. It's nice meeting y'all, the woman said. "Oh, don't look so intimidated, I don't blame ya for what happened to my husband here." Still, the awkwardness wasn't going to dissipate any time soon. Inko's biological father wasn't troubled by it, though. Come in, Shin excitedly said. "Most of the family is here already." Where are we staying?" Inko asked. "We have guest rooms. I am afraid you'll have to share with some of your cousins," Aina said, addressing Izuku. "I'll warn you, however, those kids are snugglers." Ochako and Izuku frowned at each other, silently repeating, "Snugglers." The Usagiyama couple proceeded to guide the newcomers into the house and gave them an impromptu tour. The place felt bigger inside than outside, with a large central hall. Izuku was not surprised by the many rabbit decorations. There were paintings of prancing bunnies or just cute images of rabbits snuggling together. Pictures lined up the hallways with what Izuku assumed were his extended family members. Once they had dropped their stuff in the rooms they would be staying, Shin and Aina led the group to the back door. There, Izuku and company met the rest of family. Izuku knew there would be more than a handful of people, but he had failed to grasp just how many relatives he actually had. He was already familiar with his half-aunts and half-uncles, but the Usagiyamas were a larger family than that. He didn't even know Shin had his own brothers and sisters, who in turn had their own broods. Needless to say, there were more than enough rabbit people running around. Scattered across a vast garden annexed to the grass field to the left and trees on its border, Izuku's relatives came in all shapes and ages. For the most part, it appeared the most prominent quirks were either like Azumi's full mutant quirk, or Rumi's partial one. The variety came mostly in the fur color. However, a slight majority of the people hanging outside appeared to be quirkless. In any case, it was hard to analyze a crowd of people that could have easily reached the 100 individuals, especially with so many kids running around. At the moment, the children were busy playing soccer or hide and seek. The adults, on the other hand, were in small groups chatting. Long tables had been arranged for the upcoming meal and a few people were preparing plates and utensils. At a side, a few men were working on grills and barbecues. One by one, Izuku and his group were introduced to the gathered people. He must have shaken the hand of over 30 people, before he finally made it to the other end of the green garden. Such had been the number of individuals they had met, that by the end of it all it was already time for lunch. Then again, Izuku wasn't sure at what time they had arrived. Lunch was a lively affair. There was salad, meat, roasted vegetables and a lot more. There was a lot of chatter and laughter, and the air was filled with merriment. Izuku and his mother were the target of many questions from nearby relatives. The children in particular were dying to learn more about Ue and Izuku's chosen career. Not surprisingly, most kids were fans of Maruko, who was seemingly absent. Question after question, Izuku tried to satiate the near-endless curiosity of the children. Ochako tried her best but left Izuku to do most of the talking. Katsuki, on the other hand, well, he wasn't exactly forthcoming and replied with the most forced politeness Izuku had ever seen in a person. With twitching cheeks and a forced smile bearing gritting teeth, Katsuki appeared to be in physical pain by merely trying to maintain a conversation with the children. Any one time Izuku feared Katsuki would finally lose his patience and shout, a mere glance from his mother gave him the will enough to keep his barely holding temper. After the rather extended lunch, Shin approached Izuku and company. "Hey, grandson, there are a couple of people that asked for you to check on them when you made it here," the rabbit man said. "Really? Who?" Izuku asked, confused. "Don't really know. One of them was a teacher from UA that wanted to see, but the rest were introduced by Rumi," Shin said. "A teacher," Izuku thought. "Could it be Aizawa?" asked Ochako. "Maybe it's all someone else," Izuku said. Or at least, he hoped that was the case. Izuku really wanted to see All Might and check on him. Still, he was confused by the strange request. "Why didn't you tell us earlier?" wondered Izuku. And for you to miss lunch?" huffed Shin. "Follow me, there at the camping area." Hence, Izuku, Ochako and even Katsuki found themselves following Shin once again out of the open garden, through a narrow passageway amidst bamboo and then onto a tree area. Inko and Mitsuki came right behind them, looking around with interest. Who are these people exactly? Mitsuki wondered. Friends of Rumi's, Shin grunted with annoyance. I wouldn't have rented the place over otherwise. Friends of Maruko? Ochako asked with disbelief. Colleagues maybe, I don't know, Shin shrugged. Rumi never asked to allow anyone to stay anywhere close to us, so I guess that's as close as you can get to being her friend. He frowned, trying to remember something. I think a couple of them are heroes. Not all of them, though. Ochako and Izuku traded baffled expressions. Just who could they be? The camping area happened to be a section of the mountainside with enough trees to offer shade yet sparely enough to allow for tents. There were a few benches here and there and a couple of latrines, but other than that, the entire place was surrounded by nature and lacking of human influence. At the moment, it was far from deserted. There were 3 distinct tents. However, Izuku didn't care about that, but rather the first person the group came across as they entered the camping area. All M. Izuku was about to exclaim, only to be interrupted by his mother. Mr. Yagi! Exclaimed Inko. What a surprise to see you here. And indeed, there he was, the man who had been missing and who had only given cryptic answers to Izuku. All Might in all of his weak, skeletal form, with a simple shirt and shorts looking like a camper and carrying what a pot filled with water ready to be used for cooking. Truthfully, he couldn't look even more out of place if he tried. Oh, young Midoriya, Mrs. Midoriya, All Might said with a smile. Wait, you know that man? Mitsuki asked, giving All Might a careful once-over through squinted eyes. Yes, he was Izuku's personal trainer for UA, Inko told her friend. Izuku's face heated up as he felt the way the head of Bakugo snapped towards him. Izuku could already imagine the burning, furious red eyes set on his back, demanding answers. You trained Izu-kun, huh? Mitsuki hummed. She shrugged, grinned at the man and then offered a hand. Well, if you got my favorite honorary nephew into UA then what can I say but thank you. Oh, it was no problem, ma'am, All Might chuckled. He put down the pot and shook hands with Mitsuki. Hey, Katsuki, don't be rude. Introduce yourself, Mitsuki ordered. There's no need. We know each other, All Might said. He gave a nod at Ochako. And young Uraraka as well. He teaches at UA actually, Izuku added. You do? You never told us, Inko said. It was supposed to be a secret at the time, awkwardly chuckled All Might. And I guess I never got the chance to tell you afterwards. Hey, Toshinori, what's the hold up? Someone asked behind the number 1 hero. The oddest part was that it was spoken in perfect, fluent English, with an American accent. It took one glance on the man for Izuku to realize just who it was. That's, stammered Izuku, pointing at the newcomer. God damn freaking David Shield! Bakugo exclaimed in shock. The man in question went to stand next to All Might and stare at the newcomers, perplexed. Izuku couldn't believe it. It was actually him. David Shield, one of the most famous support gear inventors of the century. Like All Might, he looked out of his element, dressed as if he was in his holidays and as far away from work as possible. David, allow me to introduce you to some of my students, All Might said. They are Katsuki Bakugo, Ochako Uraraka and Izuku Midoriya. Children, as you already know, this is David Shield. Ah yes. I have heard quite a lot about you, David said with a commendable attempt at Japanese. Before he was introduced to Inko and Mitsuki, a young woman hurried to the man's side. The strong resemblance to David gave Izuku pause, before he realized who she was. Melissa, David said, startled. Dad, the girl said. What's the hold up? She glanced at the newcomers, before grinning. Izuku had to admit, she was rather pretty, tall, attractive and pale-skinned. Melissa Shield had wavy blonde hair and aqua blue eyes. Hello there, Melissa said with a far better Japanese. I am Melissa Shield. Do you know Toshinori here? You could say that, chuckled All Might. Allow me to offer proper introductions. Izuku's face immediately lit up as Melissa shook his hand. Her hands were really smooth, and there was something about her pretty face that left him flustered. He immediately shook his head, trying to dispel those thoughts. The Shields then shook hands with Inko and Mitsuki. It was as she shook hands with Melissa then that both Katsuki and Izuku saw a bright glint in Mitsuki's eyes. The way the woman looked between Katsuki and Melissa meant that Auntie Mitsuki was back to her old shenanigans. Katsuki scowled, all while Izuku tried not to laugh. Something would never change, apparently. What brings one of the top inventors of the world to these parts? Mitsuki asked with a frown. We came for Toshinori here, Melissa said before her father could reply. He's an old friend of the family and we came to visit when he suffered a recent relapse on his health. All Might took issue with the explanation. I did not suffer from a relapse, young lady, I am perfectly. And as if summoned by the matter in question, All Might started violently coughing and retching, wetting a hand with blood. Mr. Yagi, squeaked a horrified Inko. Sweet Mother Teresa, exclaimed Mitsuki. Well, shit, Bakugo bluntly stated with a faint hint of concern. Such was the shock from his mother, he didn't receive a warning smack on his head. Ochako and Izuku both were almost as horrified as Inko. How could they not be? All Might looked terrible. Izuku had already seen All Might in such a state, but he could have sworn this was worse than other times. As you can see, his health has taken a turn for the worse and we are helping him take it easy, Melissa said. That's correct, David chuckled, patting All Might's back. Only God knows how much this guy has been overworked. Nonsense, muttered All Might. He glared at David, just as a playful smile stretched on his pained face. And look who's talking about overworked. It was David's turn to look offended by the statement. Melissa, on the other hand, nodded in silent agreement. Then, the number one hero's gaze met Izuku's. They locked eyes, just a few seconds. However, it was enough for Izuku to know that All Might wanted to speak with him, probably alone. Izuku could now guess why All Might had asked Shin to bring Izuku about. He would probably receive a text with a time and place later on. Let's get a move on, Melissa joked. At this pace we'll never finish lunch. You still haven't eaten yet? Ochako asked. David and Melissa awkwardly chuckled alongside the number one hero. This whole camping thing is new for us, admitted All Might. By the way, have you seen Rumi? Shin abruptly asked from the sidelines. She missed lunch with the entire family. We haven't seen her, All Might replied. We thought she'd be with you. Damn, what a pity, sighed Shin. We had gathered the entire family and she missed it. I am sure she would have loved the roasted vegetables. There were a trio of growls. Izuku and the others looked with raised eyebrows at the stomachs of the three blondes before them. You don't have any leftovers by any chance, do you? Melissa wondered. Ochako was by no means jealous. Of course not. That was preposterous. And yet, seeing Melissa Shield of all people hanging out with Izuku, she couldn't help but feel a pang of jealousy. She squashed it down, or rather tried to curb stomp the feeling back from whence it came. Sadly, that ugly beast kept rearing its ugly head. Melissa and Izuku had hit it off surprisingly well. No one was more shocked than Bakugo, who upon finally sating his curiosity about All Might and the shields, decided to scoff dismissively and go away to do his own thing in the mountains. Mitsuki and Inko, on the other hand, chose to return to the house, perhaps to keep chatting with the rest of Inko's extended family, or maybe to find something else to do. That left Izuku and Ochako to hang around with All Might. It was still hard to believe the scrawny skeletal man she could see was All Might of all people. And the shields. In the end, David and All Might decided to busy themselves trying to start a fire, what in turn meant that Izuku and Ochako ended up talking with Melissa. A part of Ochako wanted to be happy about Izuku making yet more friends. Given what she knew of Izuku's prior friendless life, she was more than glad about it. Still, another part of Ochako took issue on said friendly acquaintance being a rather attractive girl, and a hero enthusiast to boot. There's no reason to be mad, Ochako told herself. We agreed that I was dating Izumi, right? Wow, that's amazing. Izuku exclaimed. I wish I had met so many heroes. All I've ever done has been to study them from afar or, he trailed off, blushing, getting their autographs during signing events. You aren't the only one, giggled Melissa. I have a small library with my own comments and observations from heroes. Really? Gasped Izuku. Of course. I wouldn't aim to be the finest inventor and support engineer if I didn't try to understand my future costumer base, laughed the young inventor. Ochako felt an eyebrow twitch at that. Go figure, that same attractive girl was as nerdy as Izuku. Yeah, the whole thing about treating Izuku as two people had been a mistake. Worse, Ochako felt awful as she thought about it. She hadn't had the chance to actually do anything with Izumi, given the whole aftermath of the USJ, but as everything slowed down and they were allowed to catch their breaths, Ochako was starting to have second thoughts on the whole thing. True, Ochako was attracted to Izumi, yet it felt wrong to ask of Izuku to just be one form to date and dismiss the other one as a friend. Izuku might have tried to convince himself that he could play two people, but Ochako wasn't so sure, nor did she know she actually wanted him to. As it so happened, Ochako was starting to have problems separating Izumi from Izuku, and Melissa Shield was only exacerbating it. That's amazing, Izuku gasped, breaking Ochako from her thoughts once again. I know, right? Laughed Melissa. You should come to I Island. Her eyes lit up. You should definitely come for this year's expo. I have been allowed to present my own work there, and I'm sure you'll have a blast there with all the guest pro heroes. I wish I could, but I don't think I will ever be able to afford going to I Island, mused Izuku. Nonsense. I am sure Uncle Mr. Yagi wouldn't mind taking you with him. He always visits us during the expo, Melissa said. Although you could win the UA Sports Festival and you'd win a seat for the expo, you and someone else. Really? That's great, said Izuku. He turned to Ochako. Now we have more of a reason to get first place at the sports festival, right Ochako? Right, replied Ochako, pulling a wide grin. Unfortunately, that was when Melissa and Izuku went back to talking about heroes and villains and costumes and support gear. Ochako would be lying if she didn't feel a bit out of place with the two of them. Ochako didn't mind, however, as it allowed to return to her prior thoughts. By a mere glance, Ochako could tell that Izuku was actually happy in Melissa's presence, and the feeling was mutual. They both shared interests, maybe even the same passionate hobbies. What was stopping Izuku from dating Melissa? In all truth, hadn't they agreed Ochako was only dating Izumi? Yet, Ochako took issue with the thought of Melissa dating Izuku. Could she be developing feelings for the boy? I am being so unfair to Izuku, Ochako mentally groaned. What possessed me to try to split Izumi like that? She felt so stupid and childish at the moment. Sadly, Ochako needed to talk her issues with someone, and her list of people was rather short. Her parents were out of the question, and she wasn't sure if she wanted to address the problem with Izuku. No, the only person she wanted to talk about her relationship was Z, and she was missing. Are you alright? Huh? Ochako realized Izuku was talking to her. Oh. Yes, I am just thinking. That's all. Izuku smiled and stood up. Ochako watched, confused, as he helped her up before turning towards the young blonde. It was nice talking to you, Melissa. I think Ochako and I will go and explore a bit, Izuku decided. He glanced at the sky, at least while we can. There can only be a few more hours of sunlight. Sure. I don't mind. I think I will try and help Dad and Uncle Uncle Toshinori. With the fire, Melissa said. God knows how helpless those two must be right now. The trio actually laughed at the thought of the number one hero and the greatest inventor of his age both struggling with basic camping stuff. By the looks of it, it seemed that so happened to be the case. And with that, Izuku transformed into Izumi and, before Ochako knew what was going on, it was a furry rabbit girl who was pulling her away. Ochako smiled, yet her conflicting emotions swirled in her gut. Wow, who would have thought we'd meet David and Melissa Shield, said Izumi. The two walked down the path back to the Usagiyama house. Instead of mingling with Izumi's relatives, they went to the open fields next to the house that were mostly abandoned. They could hear the shouts and screams of playing children, and the chatter of adults lost in their own discussions. That left the two girls to talk without any eavesdroppers. I wonder why they are here, though, Ochako asked. Izumi didn't appear to care that much, instead letting go of Ochako's hand and snuggling against her. Ochako wouldn't lie when she felt her girlfriend's warmth against her, but a new distinct feeling surfaced in her chest. Guilt. What do you think? Ochako said, trying to dispel her emotions. Maybe they came to visit All Might, decided Izumi. He was really hurt during the USJ, so they could be concerned for his health. She frowned, a hand moving to her chin. Even snuggled against Ochako, she went on. her voice growing softer and faster. Or perhaps they're here to try to create the means to help All Might recuperate some power so he can return to action. That or they're designing mechanical implants of some kind. But why would they be here, right now? Ochako giggled, finding the whole muttering thing rather cute. She looked around and smiled. Seeing only comfy grassland around them, she grinned and launched herself on the rabbit girl, tickling her tummy. Arg. Stop. Arg. Izumi protested as she laughed. Ochako didn't stop, doubling down instead. No, no. Stop, giggled the rabbit girl. Then Ochako pulled Izumi down onto her. The two fell on the cushioned grass and stayed there, stuck to each other's side. They laughed a bit at it, before remaining like that, looking up at the sky. Ochako wondered if she could bring herself to do the same to Izuku. A part of her dismissed the thought, while the rest remained curious. Izumi in turn remained silent, happy and smiling with contentment. Minutes passed before Ochako decided to break the silence, lest she went back to feeling guilty and overthinking matters. So, you and Melissa, huh? Ochako said. What about Melissa? Asked Izumi, blinking at her. You sure had a lot to talk about, Ochako commented. Well, yeah, we both had really close childhood experiences, Izumi said before giving a sad smile. We were both told we were powerless in a world filled with amazing powers. Of course, she pulled her act together and developed her abilities. Izumi looked down, crestfallen. You were picked on and bullied, Ochako said, squeezing her hand with reassurance. You were never given a chance to grow. Izumi smiled her thanks at the brunette. And hey, look where you are now, Ochako pointed out. In UA and one of the mightiest of all 1A. Izumi looked away, flustered by the praise. Ochako, though, felt that annoying feeling of guilt surfacing in her gut. She needed to release some of her worries. Hey, Izumi? Yeah? Do you really? Ochako trailed off. What is it? Asked Izumi, concerned. Ochako remained hesitant. Should she bring it up? In the end she sighed and pressed on. Do you really want to only date me as Izumi? Asked Ochako. Yeah, nodded the rabbit girl. She squeezed Ochako's hand. Why wouldn't I? It's just that, Ochako sadly didn't know how to put her feelings into words. Hey, I told you, I don't mind. You like me as Izumi, right? Izumi said with a grin. So I don't mind sticking to this form for you. That was far from reassuring. If anything, it made Ochako feel worse. She felt as if she was forcing Izuku to pick a form just for her. Hell, it just might have been the case. Wouldn't you prefer we dated regardless the form? Ochako asked. Infinity Girl, you can't choose what form you find attractive, but I can pick the form I like, Izumi said with a careless shrug. And I like you and want to be with you. Why wouldn't I choose to be Izumi? Because you aren't two different people, Ochako wanted to say. You once told me you didn't like that your parents preferred your Izumi form over your first one, Ochako pointed out. This is different, scoffed Izumi. Is it? Ochako wondered. She found herself unwilling to voice her opinion, however. Izumi looked a bit frustrated and Ochako didn't want to push the matter. In any case, silence fell between the two. Izumi snuggled closer to Ochako, and even started chinning the brunette, much to her amusement. Sadly, Ochako soon was grimacing. She looked up at the clear blue sky and moved a hand onto Izumi's head. As she absent-mindedly petted Izumi behind the ears, earning a hum from the rabbit girl, Ochako pondered on her latest dilemma. It was late at night when Izumi finally went to speak to All Might. She had received a message from the pro-hero, giving her a time and place, and now it was time to make a move. The room around her was rather bare, and it looked more as some kind of barrack than a guest room. Then again, it was hard to accommodate so many relatives otherwise. There were 10 bunk beds, all of them filled with cousins, second cousins, cousins twice removed, and the list went on. By the sounds of it, they were all asleep. Louder than most, Izumi could make out Ochako's snores. Izumi stifled her giggles at that and jumped off the mattress, landing softly on the ground. Her eyes fell on a nearby bed where 2 of her younger cousins slept together. Full mutant types like Izumi. The 2 looked no older than 9 years old and snuggled against each other almost instinctively. I wonder when they actually moved together, Izumi wondered. She scratched her head, before giggling at what Aina had said. That's what she meant by snugglers, huh? Izumi quickly shook her head and tiptoed out of the room. Even with the complete darkness at the corridors, Izumi managed to traverse the manor and out of the building without much of an issue. In fact, within minutes, Izumi was outside at the back garden. She found All Might on the same grasslands Izumi and Ochako had hanged out together. He sat on a rock, alone and staring at the stars with strange fondness, right next to a camping lantern. "Hey, All Might," Izumi called. Young Izumi greeted All Might with a grin. "I hope I didn't cause any trouble calling you here." "No, it was no problem," Izumi said, hopping to sit next to the man. "I actually wanted to talk to you." All Might nodded and wearily sighed. "Yes, I guessed you would. I apologize for ignoring you," All Might said. "Unfortunately, there was a lot to do after the USJ attack. I had to help the police with the investigation and some friends of mine showed up to aid me. That is to say, I had my hands full." He looked ashamed regardless, as if it was his own fault he had been injured by Nomu and was caught up with a vital criminal investigation. "It's all right," Izumi said. "I get it, I really do." Mentor and pupil fell into an awkward silence. The man wanted to explain, but appeared to be failing to find the courage to carry on, while the rabbit girl didn't want to push All Might for explanations. He had already gone through enough. Thus, they remained content like that for a moment, before Izumi finally made the first move, if only because she grew a bit bored. "How bad is it, All Might?" Izumi asked. All Might sighed, shoulders slumped. Izumi tried not to look too worried, but failed miserably. "1 hour, All Might stated. That answer chilled Izumi's blood. "I can go full All Might for 1 hour, All Might said, only to bitterly scoff. Allegedly. David estimations always take into account a good rest and lack of stress and effort. Less than hour then. All Might, the symbol of peace, could only stand tall and protect the innocents for less than an hour per day. That was too short. Worse, it was a steep decline. He had gone from the previous 3 hours to 1 in a matter of weeks. How?" Izumi asked. "The Nomu," muttered the pro-hero. He glared at his clenched fists. He knew where to punch. "But how?" "That's what I want to talk to you about," All Might said. His head dropped and Izumi felt worse for her mentor and idol. All Might looked so frail, and yet it also looked like he was carrying the weight of the world. "The Nomu, that creature wasn't a man with one quirk, young Izumi," All Might said. "Fast healing, shock absorption, enhanced strength." Izumi felt a knot form in her knot. She could tell this was going to be a somber talk. That is to say, my circle of allies and friends, believe that the Nomu was a bioengineered individual created by an individual whose ability stands unique amongst all quirks," All Might said. Izumi just stared at the hero, her heart racing. Slowly, All Might turned to look at Izumi. His eyes looked haunted and filled with dread. "All for one," All Might whispered. "That's the name of the villain who injured me to this state, and the man who has the ability to remove and give quirks at will. He can, collect them and also use them as he pleases." Izumi felt her breath catch on her throat. Such a quirk, the implications were horrifying. That villain could be near invincible, collecting all manner of powers. "I thought I had killed him, but given this Nomu, we believe he might have survived after all these years," All Might said. "On the bright side, the lack of actual movement from the underworld suggests his previous empire has yet to resurface and his presence, if our belief is correct, has remained minimal. With any luck, he is weak as well." "We believe so, but that could be just hopeful thinking." Izumi looked at her feet. So there was a villain out there that could fight All Might, the symbol of peace and greatest hero, and even injure the hero. "If you are to face this villain and his minions, you'll have to get stronger, Izumi," All Might said. "There are people who are going to help you. They will guide you and make you stronger." "Who are you talking about, All Might?" Izumi asked. "You'll meet them tomorrow," chuckled All Might. "They were eager to start your training and so am I." Izumi rolled her eyes yet smiled nonetheless. She would allow All Might to once again remain cryptic about her soon-to-be mentors. All Might took a deep breath before sighing wearily. He clenched his fists and he suddenly looked both pained and beyond worried. All for One is powerful, and so was his organization back in the day. I don't know how much of his former power he possesses, but you must prepare regardless, Riley said All Might. Izumi nodded. I am sorry you have to face this threat, All Might somberly said. I thought I had dealt with him. I truly believed you wouldn't have to face him. You did your best, All Might, Izumi said. No one can blame you for not trying. No, Izumi. Because of my failure, you now will have to carry a heavy burden, All Might said. The same burden all of our predecessors have carried since the conception of One for All. Izumi felt her heart skip a beat. She took a deep soothing breath, and tried to calm her nerves. What do you mean, conception? Izumi asked. Had One for All been created? The fact that it was a derivative of All for One suggested a link between the two. You know how there have been 7 previous wielders of One for All, correct? All Might started saying, slow and deliberate. Izumi merely nodded. As it so happens, young Izumi, the fight between All for One and the wielders of One for All started decades ago. It all began with 2 brothers. And so, Izumi sat there as All Might narrated a long dark tale about 2 brothers, one righteous and brave, the other evil and ambitious. Whereas one brother was seemingly powerless, the other had what looked like the most powerful quirk in existence. All for One. The ideals of the 2 siblings came to a clash, even after the evil brother gifted the other a stacking quirk. It was quite the twist for the seemingly quirkless brother to actually have had the quirk to pass over abilities all along, thus giving birth to One for All. It was quite the tale, and by the end of it, Izumi could only stare at All Might. It sure was quite the shocker to hear about such things happening so long ago. One for All had been quite the weird thing when Izumi had first heard about it, but the notion that such a quirk had been created, and by accident, gave a surreal feel to the entire story. And now, you are the 9th inheritor of One for All, summarized All Might. He looked at the stars, once again with that same fondness of before. No, not fondness. Izumi realized what that look was all about. Melancholy. She couldn't explain why All Might looked like that, however, and it certainly confused her to no end. My time is coming to an end, Izumi. Soon, it will be your time to become the pillar that this society needs, proclaimed All Might. Izumi looked up at the stars. It was a pretty sight all right, yet she didn't understand what drew All Might's attention. Izumi returned her attention to All Might himself. He in turn gave her a smile, looking away from the night sky. Don't worry about me, I'll hang around, although I can't promise you'll see a lot of your favorite hero, All Might said with some humor. I might be forced to an early retirement, unfortunately, so enjoy the symbol of peace while he is around. Although he tried to pull a brave face and smile, Izumi could tell that the thought of being unable to one day save people bothered him, and a lot. That in turn bothered Izumi. All Might, you'll always be my favorite hero no matter the form, Izumi said. All Might looked away, smiling at the ground. I know, All Might nodded before returning his attention to the heavens above. I know. Izumi and All Might kept stargazing for a while longer, lost in the twinkling jewels of the cosmos. The sight was mesmerizing, and not one spot of the sky was like the others. While it was sure a beautiful sight, Izumi still couldn't find a pull towards them, not like All Might apparently. After a while, Izumi called it a night and left a melancholic All Might on his own. She found no problem slipping back into the house. However, when she entered the bedroom, rather than going to her bed, she hesitated. Instead, she looked at Ochako's bed and, with a smile, hopped over to her. Ochako wouldn't mind sleeping together, after all, and Izumi wanted some company at the moment, given all she had learned that night. No sooner had Izumi laid on the mattress, Ochako grabbed Izumi like a plushie and cuddled against the rabbit girl. Izumi smiled, happy to be like that, and feeling some of her worries vanish. Slowly, sleep came to her, until finally, she slipped into the land of dreams. Awareness came slowly the following morning. Sunlight drifted from the windows, and Izumi gradually managed to make sense of her surroundings. It was the level of comfort around her that kept her rather groggy. When had the world turned so cushy? Izumi could still feel Ochako's body pressed against her, but there was more warmth and softness all around. Izumi opened her eyes, before blinking. Why was she seeing fur everywhere? She looked around, only for her eyes to widen. Snuggled against Izumi and Ochako, 7 of Izumi's younger cousins were cuddled in a huge pile of rabbit children on top of them. True, they looked adorable, but Izumi had no idea why they chose to snuggle against them like that. However, Izumi had other concerns that morning, like the 3 people silently cooing at them. Mitsuki and Inko were there, next to Aina, with their cell phones aimed at the fluff pile. Perhaps having only a Shido back at the dorms wasn't such a bad thing in comparison. The Usagiyama estate, or manor, if you asked Izumi, might have been hidden from civilization amidst the mountains, but there so happened to be a town nearby. It was by no means a large settlement, but it did have more than enough shops to entertain any tourists. At least, enough to entertain a couple of teenagers on a date. There were tiny shops, diners and cafes to choose from. They were small and humble. The town also happened to have a cinema. It was there where Ochako had dragged Izumi in order to escape a certain pair of cooing and teasing mothers and the curious looks from the resident rabbit people. There was something about waking up in a rabbit fluff pile that had made Izumi and Ochako want to escape the Usagiyama residence. In any case, they started their date early in the morning, driven downtown by one of the many newly discovered extended family members of Izumi. Even though they chatted a bit, Izumi and Ochako learned little about that guy, aside from being friendly. From the tiny central plaza, Ochako and Izumi paid a visit to the small shops before going straight to the cinema. They didn't spend much thought on the movie, only wanting to find themselves in a secluded spot, away from the world, all by themselves. There so happened to be a couple of children and adults in the sole cinema of the town, but they were too scattered and distracted by the film. In any case, Izumi didn't care where she was, for she felt like it was paradise in that moment. Seated next to Ochako, concealed under the darkness of the cinema, the rabbit girl ignored the movie in turn for her girlfriend's attention. Izumi's head rested against Ochako's rather cushy bosom all while the brunette scratched Izumi behind the ears. Seriously, Izumi couldn't be any more content than in that moment. Ochako, on her part, looked more than happy to offer Izumi some ministrations. The way Ochako's hand worked over her fur made Izumi want to purr. The brunette knew what she was doing, quickly finding the right spot, and leaving Izumi curled against Ochako is little better than a demanding ball of fluff. Such was the delight of the ministrations that Izumi didn't rise a fuzz on where her head had ended on. She could have stayed like that, groggily enjoying being petted for eternity. Sadly, as the saying goes, nothing good lasts forever. In Izumi's case, her peace came crashing down as she recalled what All Might had told her. The newly resurfaced All for One. The desperate need for someone to step up in All Might's place and the fact All Might's already numbered days had dropped considerably. "You all right?" Ochako asked. She frowned with concern, her hand unmoving against Izumi's fur. Izumi fought the urge to sigh, realizing she must had been too tense. "Kind of," was all Izumi could say. Before Ochako could ask, Izumi raised her head, pressing her fur against Ochako's hovering hand. The brunette giggled at her demanding girlfriend, before she went back to scratching Izumi behind her ears. Once again, Izumi rested her head against Ochako with half-lidded eyes. The tension, though, didn't leave her body, nor the harrowing thoughts. By the looks of it, Ochako wasn't quite convinced. Instead of prodding Izumi for answers, a look of guilt flashed across her face. From the corner of her almost closed eyes, Izumi worried she might have been too dismissive of Ochako's concerns. "Mr. Yagi," murmured Izumi. "I was thinking about him." Ochako paused her petting, startled by the words. Once again, Izumi pushed her head against the unmoving hand, silently demanding much-needed petting. Ochako stifled a chuckle and kept petting her girlfriend. "Did you manage to speak with him?" Ochako wondered. "Yes, last night," Izumi said. Ochako's thankfully kept working on Izumi, her hand moving down to her back and neck. Izumi hummed appreciatively and snuggled closer against Ochako. With her nose pressed against her clothes, Izumi started to notice that Ochako didn't smell, well, there was something off. Out of mere instinct, Izumi started rubbing her chin against the brunette, who thankfully found it too cute to ask, and perhaps she was troubled by worries of her own to interrupt her girlfriend. "Did he say anything?" Ochako tentatively asked. "Yeah, that the Nomu thing did a number on him," Izumi murmured. "He might retired sooner than planned." Ochako was silent for a long minute, to the point Izumi stopped chinning her and actually looked up. Ochako started at the screen further away, yet her eyes didn't appear to notice the ongoing film. "How long does he have?" asked the brunette. Izumi sighed, before hiding her face against Ochako and taking a good sniff. Now the brunette smelled perfect. Who knew rabbit people liked their own scent? "I doubt he'll be active by third year," Izumi murmured. "Next year?" Ochako's choked. "Maybe before that," Izuku stated. The two remained pressed against each other, without uttering another word. They absent-mindedly glanced at the large screen. Truthfully, had it not been for Ochako, Izumi would have hated such a loud environment. At least, Izumi couldn't deny they had some privacy. After a couple of minutes, Ochako went back to petting Izumi and offered a reassuring smile. "Hey, you know All Might. He always beats the odds and makes the impossible possible," Ochako said. Izumi wished she could believe that. She didn't say anything, allowing for her girlfriend to pet her. Izumi and Ochako tried to distract themselves, but, apparently, there was too much in both their minds to enjoy the moment. Izumi wondered if perhaps her girlfriend wasn't worried about something else. She had caught Ochako looking guilty throughout their date, and Izumi was starting to worry. What could have been troubling Ochako? Perhaps it was something related to her family, or maybe Ochako worried about Izumi. Maybe the news of All Might troubled her a lot more than she let on. On her part, Izumi found herself troubled by the responsibilities she had been given, and she had a pending meeting with yet more teachers, the ones All Might had promised. The movie ended and the two left the cinema, restless yet smiling. Hand in hand, they walked around the town a bit, but there wasn't much to see or do. It was as they were talking about lunch when Izumi received a message. To both their surprise, it was Maruko. The couple wasn't sure what to expect as they traversed the town to their destination. They speculated a bit, but when it came to the rabbit hero, anything was possible. It was also curious that they had been summoned to a diner, one that looking way too similar to those of ancient American movies. As it so happened, they found Maruko waiting for them in a corner table, dressed in a simple white shirt and black shorts. She wasn't alone, though. Next to her, grinning and with a long red tail wagging happily, was Z, clad in her usual green Hawaiian shirt and loose tie. The secretary was in her androgynous female form, looking rather giddy while savoring what looked like a blueberry smoothie. "Hey you two," Maruko called with a smirk. "How's your date going?" "Rumi, don't tease them," said Z, her eyes, though, burned with the desire to tease the teenagers herself. "Not bad," mumbled Izumi, definitely not blushing and hot-faced. "Definitely not. What about yours?" "Meh, not bad," replied Maruko noncommittally. She casually wrapped an arm around Z's shoulder, who in turn rested her head on the pro-hero. "It is going great," Z squealed. "I wish we had hanged around town more often." "And get creeped out by the locals." "Nah," huffed Maruko. "There are better places." "But you never take me anywhere," pouted Z. "What? I've taken you all around of Japan," protested Maruko. Meanwhile, Izumi and Ochako looked at the two women, amused by their byplay. "But enough of us," Maruko said before Z could reply. "How are you two holding up? Sorry I didn't meet up with you yesterday, but we had some business to tend to." "Business?" Izumi asked, intrigued. "Paperwork, nothing important," muttered Maruko. "Oh, why don't you tell them, love?" Z cooed, visibly excited. "Tell us what?" Ochako wondered. "Z, don't you dare," Maruko all but ordered her secretary. As it so happened, the rabbit hero had little control over the fox woman. "Rumi has decided to become a full-time teacher at UA, Z announced. "She's extending her contract." The reaction was instantaneous. "You're what?" Izumi and Ochako gasped. "Not so loud, damn it," Maruko hissed, glaring at their surroundings. She really didn't have to worry, with the diner being deserted. Perhaps Maruko and Z had picked the place precisely because of that. In any case, seeing as there were no eavesdroppers, Maruko groaned and slammed her face against the table. "Why did you have to tell them?" "Why not? They were going to learn about it eventually," Z said with a shrug. But why?" Izumi asked. "Doesn't that mean you are giving up our agency at Hiroshima?" "Yep," grunted a resigned Maruko, her face hidden against the table. "But wouldn't that mean you'll do a lot less hero work?" added Ochako with a frown. "How are you going to keep your position in the polls?" There was a long awkward moment in which Z offered a lopsided smile while Maruko grumbled under her breath. Ochako's dumbstruck face stared at the two adults. Izumi wasn't faring much better. "Oh," was all the brunette said. Izumi, on her part, was ridden with questions. "But why?" Izumi asked. "Is it because of the USJ incident?" "Yes," sighed Maruko, rising her face. Her red eyes shone with conviction and anger. You all saw All Might, right? Shush, don't say his name so loud, whispered Z. Fine, Toshinori, whatever, grunted Maruko. Right, thing is, odds are he will need full-time help teaching, so the principal thought I could take over if needed. Since I was kind of an aide already, he thought I was a good option and I accepted. Just like that, Izumi wondered. What, you don't want me to be your teacher next year too? Teased Maruko. Her amusement didn't reach her eyes. It's not that. We thought you wanted to make it high in the rankings, Ochako added. Yeah, well, the beepers at Hiroshima clearly didn't want me and, you know what? I am not about to abandon you too, cousin? Maruko replied with a smirk. She balled her fists, her smile turning sardonic. Moreover, the League of Villains and I have a score to settle. There's of course more than just that, Z explained with a roll of her eyes. The attack on the USJ might have been an utter disaster for the villains, with hundreds arrested and all that, but it has gotten the public concerned. A group of villains did manage to successfully infiltrate one of the most prestigious hero schools and attack its students, didn't it? Ochako wearily remarked. Yes, but the true problem involves All Might. It is the first time in his career that any of his fights has been less than, one-sided, Z whispered with a grimace. The principal has managed to keep most of the events under wraps, but even so the fact remains that many journalists did not see All Might after the event, only injured pro-hero teachers. Many have assumed the worst. It is the first crack in the era of peace we've been living, muttered Maruko, glaring at the table. As always, people have once again proven to be sheep and have started questioning UA, as if they could have done anything more. Fear does tend to make people irrational, Z sighed. In any case, the principal has been trying to make a few changes to reassure the public, and parents, that the students will be safer in the future. And Maruko is one of them? Ochako asked. Yes, Z nodded. Nezu has decided to employ a few more heroes to UA as well and... She lowered her voice, glanced sideways and leaned forward, acting conspiratorial. He might expand the hero program, Z whispered. Expand the hero program? Wait, you mean add more students to the hero department? Ochako asked with a frown. How is that going to fix anything? It's obviously a power move, huffed Maruko. You know, a message to the League of Villains. Something like, not only you failed in kidnapping our students, we are doubling down and have yet more students. That and maybe the principal isn't letting the USJ incident go to waste. With so many concerned parents and even the government eager to be seen helping, I don't doubt Nezu will try to squeeze as much funds as possible, explained Z. From a practical standpoint, it would mean hiring more teachers, mostly pro-heroes, have yet more teenagers learning how to fight and, overall, give an air that the school wants to make sure there will be more pro-heroes in the future. But hasn't the school's reputation fallen due to the incident? Izumi wondered. It doesn't look good when students get attacked. For the time being it does look like UA isn't a safe place, and journalists aren't helping with that view. On the other hand, Nezu is trying to spin the incident as a sign that dark times are coming and we need to prepare. I suppose the sports festival will decide which public opinion will prevail, Z hummed, lost in thought. The sports festival? Chorused Izumi and Ochako. Yep, it is still happening and Nezu is going to go out of his way to put a show for the world this time around, chuckled Maruko. What does the sports festival has to do with anything? Ochako asked. Right now. A lot, Maruko huffed. Think about it. The school will put in display their future heroes and give this whole act that they are way above some morons trying to attack them. Everyone is going on about villains are growing bolder and that maybe All Might is headed towards retirement, so now is the time to give one big show. It is time to tell the world that the upcoming heroes from UA have everything in the bag. And if he also expands on the hero department, the principal is pretty much promising yet better odds in a world without All Might, Z remarked. Besides, I am sure showing that the class that was attacked by villains is both unharmed and enjoying such an event will probably dispel most rumors or hearsay. That means you two better put on a good show, you hear me? Maruko said with a smirk. You are going to hit the streets in a couple of years and I expect you to rise high in the rankings. Now that I am going to be full-time tutoring both of you, you better make it to the top, or else. You hear me? Yes, ma'am, chorused Izumi and Ochako. Good, harumphed Maruko. Speaking of tutors, she turned to Izumi. You and I have to pay All Might Rumi Toshinori, I mean, a visit. He has something he wants to talk to you about. Her other teachers, realized Izumi. Her heart skipped a beat. Today he was going to meet them, after all. It was all happening so fast. Maruko clapped once and stood to her feet, much to Z's protests. The foxwoman whined, turning into a little toddler close to crying. Maruko merely laughed and patted the little fox child on the head. Let's go, Lil Bunny, Maruko urged. Right now? Izumi said, squeezing Ochako's hand. Yep, Maruko said. Instead of waiting further, Maruko unceremoniously picked Izumi and held her under one arm. Izumi struggled against her captor, cousin, but the rabbit hero seemed to have quite the grip. We'll be back before tea time, Maruko announced as she walked away. Ochako wasn't by any means a pervert, but her eyes couldn't help wandering towards Izumi's backside. It definitely didn't help how the way she was being carried happened to accentuate such part, that and that cotton tail of hers was hypnotizing. When they finally left, Ochako turned towards Z, only to squeak and blush. The secretary had turned into her womanly form and was looking at her with a knowing look on his face. The foxwoman wiggled her eyebrows, making Ochako blush even more. Those cotton tails sure are hard to miss, aren't they? Teased Z. Ochako's face grew hotter by the second under the foxwoman's gaze. Unfortunately, Z wasn't done with the brunette. So, how is it going, dear? Asked Z, leaning forward with a hungry look on her face. It must be quite the experience, dating a boy that can turn into a fluffy bunny girl. That made Ochako recoil. In fact, she felt like she had been slapped on the face. Guilt swelled in her gut and she averted her eyes. Oh no, are things going south already? Z wondered. Sorry I asked. Oh no. Things are going great, Ochako hastily said. She grimaced and then added, sort of. The remorse didn't abandon her face. Z raised an inquisitive eyebrow but otherwise didn't push the issue. Ochako, though, felt a mounting desire to talk her problems. In fact, she had been planning to find an opportunity to do just that with Z. Sadly, one thing was the theory, the other was taking action. In the end, Ochako sighed and, mustering her courage, decided to speak. I think I made a big mistake, Ochako mumbled. Oh, what did you do, dear? Z asked with a teasing smile. As you might know, Izumi and I are dating, Ochako said. Really? You are? I hadn't noticed, sarcastically replied Z. Geez, love, anyone with eyes knew that? Yeah, right, so, thing is that, Ochako trailed off, averting her eyes. I might be only dating Izumi. Ochako remained seated, staring at her lap. The lack of response made her heart beat faster. Slowly, she turned to look at Z. Ochako found a very angry foxwoman glaring at her. You are doing what now? Z whispered. Her voice was low, and it had an edge to it that made Ochako immediately feel scared out of her wits. It was, in fact, the same tone Ochako's mother used whenever Ochako messed up big time. I know it is wrong, Ochako immediately said. That's not what he needs, Z admonished. Ochako bowed her head, feeling a knot in her gut. Even though she had known she would be reprimanded, she felt much worse than she had expected. Perhaps it was Z's rather sharp glare, or the way the redhead's jaw tightened. Ochako had never seen Miruko's secretary so angry before. What in the world possessed you to ask that of Midoriya? Z asked. Ochako grimaced. Izumi, Ochako spluttered. Z's tail whipped in anger. She folded her arms, squinting at the brunette. Ochako trailed off, only to look down in shame. Midoriya has just recently discovered this aspect of himself. It's been, 3-4 months? Barely enough time to adapt, and even then Midoriya clearly still has a long way to go before he reaches a balance, Z said. Ochako didn't say anything. In the end, Z didn't continue her rant and, instead, took a deep breath. She appeared to visibly calm down. However, Ochako could tell the secretary was more than disappointed with Ochako. I'm sorry, meekly said Ochako. It's not me you should be apologizing to, Z said, not looking at the brunette. The fox woman pinched the bridge of her nose. Look, dear, I'm sorry I went all angry on you, but you do understand that you aren't doing Midoriya any favors by giving preference to one form over another, do you? Z said. I realize that now, Ochako said. She looked at Z. I love Izumi and I want to be with her, but. Love? Z interrupted, suddenly amused. Dear, you are way too young and green to be so sure about being in love. But I am, well, I think I am, Ochako replied. Z laughed, shaking her head. Dear, you're only 15. And this is your first time dating, isn't it? What makes you so sure it is love you feel? Izumi is the first person I've ever felt so, well, attracted to. That's the thing. Love isn't a burning hot attraction. That's just your chemicals in your body urging you to get laid, giggled Z. Love is more than that. She laughed, her anger long gone. Oh, I'm so sorry for losing myself like that, Z said. I forget you are still a teenager and still learning. I remember when I was a teenager and fancied myself in love. Trust me, it rarely is like in fairy tales. I guess that's just life, though. Ochako didn't like the idea that she only felt a fleeting emotion for Izumi, or being talked down to because of her age. However, Ochako had to concede she was inexperienced when it came to dating and having a love life. It's just that, Izumi feels special. You know, different, Ochako said, unsure. Dear, it is your first teenage love, Z softly said sympathetically. Maybe Midoriya is the one, that one person you wish to hold onto for decades to come. And maybe, just maybe, he isn't that special somebody. Z's lips stretched into a foxy smirk. In fact, love, you still need to figure things out yourself, said the secretary. Me? Ochako asked, confused. Midoriya wasn't the only to make recent discoveries about himself, was he? Mused Z. What do you mean? Ochako wondered. Did you always feel attraction towards cute bunny girls all along? Z inquired. Ochako's face exploded into an intense red color. I didn't think so, snickered Z. You are taking the matter way too seriously, dear. You are a teenager, still learning about yourself. It is an age of changes, confusion, awkwardness. Rarely does a teenager figure themselves out from the onset. Then what am I supposed to do? Ochako asked. I am not exactly the best person to offer advice, said Z with a grimace. I had a rather complicated childhood. Ochako didn't miss the way Z absent-mindedly rubbed her wrists, where her scars were hidden around tight armbands. Only you can discover what will suit you best. Will you make mistakes? Definitively. However, failure shouldn't discourage you. Explore. Learn about yourself. Don't expect all answers drop on your lap. You might be surprised by what you learn, Z said. Ochako wasn't sure what Z meant by that. What could she mean by exploring or learning about herself? Was there really that much to discover? The same goes with Midoriya, Z pointed said. Ochako grimaced, feeling a reprimand in Z's words. He needs to find his own balance, Z remarked. You mean to say that he needs to grow comfortable with both forms equally, Ochako summarized. Balance isn't always at the center of things, pointed out the fox woman. Ochako frowned at the redhead, who in turn sighed and explained herself. Sometimes balance means a bit more of something over another, elaborated Z. In any case, that's up for Midoriya to figure out. What he needs is to treat both his forms as two parts of the whole, even if there is some margin of elasticity with his forms. He'll decide if he prefers one form over another. Ochako slowly nodded. Izumi and Izuku, as it so happened, were complete forms by themselves and yet could go through slight changes towards the other form. As they had discovered the previous week, there was a bit of adjusting that could take place if needed. Izumi could gain Izuku's eye color and a bit of upper body strength, and in turn Izuku could appear with amethyst eyes and possess more lower body strength. Don't force things for Midoriya, especially dating one form over another, Z insisted. I didn't force Izumi to do anything, Ochako mumbled. No, but you underestimate what a love-deprived boy will be willing to do for his crush, especially a boy who was bullied and mistreated for many years before finally making his first friend, Z said. Ochako's eyes widened. Z knew about the bullying Izumi had endured. She didn't recall ever telling Z about it. How do you know about that? Ochako asked. Z didn't reply right away. Instead, she looked away, her face marred with a vacant expression while one of her hands absent-mindedly caressing her wristbands and the scars beneath. "Let us just say that I can relate to Midoriya," Z said after a few minutes, giving Ochako a sad smile. Although she was tempted on asking Z for details, Ochako held her tongue and slowly nodded. Izumi Midoriya couldn't deny that she was nervous. After all, following Maruko deep into the woods in the middle of nowhere was never a good thing. At the same time, it was the thought was what about to happen what made it worse. Who had All Might called to train her? Suddenly, Maruko walked out a rather vast glade and stepped to a side. To her shock, Izumi quickly discovered they weren't alone. In front, straight ahead, was All Might. Or rather, Toshinori Yagi. He offered a smile, visibly happy to see Izumi. The two men on each side of the number one hero, however, quickly stole Izumi's attention. One Izumi recognized right away, Sir Night-Eye. The man was taller than she had believed, although that might have been due to her own height. He was also far sterner and more intimidating in real life. The other man, on the other hand, was surprisingly short. And old. He was very old and looked weird in his costume. "Ah, young Midoriya," All Might said with a kind smile. "It is good you could join us. Did you have a nice morning?" "Hey, All EHM. Toshinori." "Yeah, it's been nice," Izumi awkwardly replied, glancing at Sir Night-Eye and the old man. "Worry not, they know my secret as well," All Might said. "Allow me to introduce my friends here. As I have no doubt you know, this man here is Sir Night-Eye, my former sidekick." "Pleasure to meet you, sir," squeaked Izumi. Izumi shuddered as the man's cold penetrating gaze appeared to sharpen and he adjusted his glasses. He looked way too scary. "And this old man here is my former mentor Gran Torino," All Might said. "Who are you calling an old man?" gruffly grunted said old man. Izumi kept glancing at the two pro-heroes, wide-eyed. In all truth, she should have expected Sir Night-Eye to be involved. Gran Torino, on the other hand, was entirely new to Izumi, much to her own surprise. "They both are well aware of my secrets, and they have taken part in our fight against All for One," All Might proclaimed. Izumi stiffened and glanced at Maruko. The rabbit girl smirked at Izumi. "And yes, Ms. Usagiyama has been made aware of the situation regarding All for One and his misdeeds," All Might said. He sent her a meaningful look that Izumi was quick to interpret. "So she doesn't know about One for All," realized Izumi. "That's right," Maruko exclaimed, wrapping an arm around Izumi and brushing her knuckles against Izumi's head. "No one gets to threaten my cute little cousin and gets away with it." "Enough fooling around," stoically remarked Night-Eye. "We have wasted enough time dilly-dallying as it is." He sent an accusing glare at Izumi. "It would have been preferable to have started earlier rather than waste your time in frivolous activities," Night-Eye stated. "Oi, let her be," Maruko huffed, stepping in front of Izumi. "She's been through enough. She deserves some free time." "Not with the fate of our society at stake," retorted Night-Eye. "All right, brats, play nice," grunted Gran Torino. He sent a pointed glare at Night-Eye. "Maruko is right. Izumi already has a lot on her plate for us to demand even more." However, his glare jumped onto Maruko. "If we do not help her, she'll go through worse, and there's a lot riding on the brat." There was a long, awkward silence, interrupted by All Might clearing his throat. "So, now that introductions are out of the way, how about we discuss our plans?" he decided. "What plans?" Izumi asked. "Why, your training, of course," Gran Torino said with a smirk. "You don't think we just came here to say hi, now did you?" "Not if we want you to have you fully prepared for the sports festival," Night-Eye added. "Wait, prepared for the festival? What's that have to do with All for One?" Izumi wondered. "Nothing," All Might said. "But right now, we have another priority." Izumi gulped. "Great, now what?" She was reminded of her conversation with Z and Maruko earlier that day. Just how important was that one event going to be? "The sports festival shall be your first test, kid," said Gran Torino. "The world will be watching, including your enemies, so you'll need to be careful about what you show. If All for One doesn't know about your powers, he'll learn about it during the sports festival." "Right, he might recognize One for All," Izumi summarized. "However, that doesn't mean you have to play it safe either," Night-Eye added. "With All Might's time running out, The world needs to find a new symbol of hope. Wait, you don't mean, Izumi trailed off, fear gripping her heart. Congrats, Lil Bunny, Maruko said, patting her cousin. It looks like you need to convince the world you can become the next All Might. The world is already convinced you are his daughter, so they will be expecting a lot out of you already, said Gran Torino with a hint of amusement. All you need to do is play to their expectations. That means crushing everyone and getting the gold, Maruko said. Easy peasy, if you ask me. While holding back, of course, added Night Eye. It wouldn't do to reveal all of your powers and potential. Izumi looked at her mentions, slack jaw. How in the world was she supposed to do that? Be the best but without going all out? Worry not, young Midoriya, All Might said with a reassuring tone. We're here to help you to the best of our abilities. You don't have that much time left, though, so we better get started, gruffly said Gran Torino. Indeed, time is already scarce as it is, Night Eye said, before squinting at Izumi. Her ears dropped, already knowing what he was about to suggest. Thus, I recommend you forego your current relationship. There is too much at stake for you to be distracted by teenage drama. Oi, stick your nose out of her business, Maruko growled. He's not entirely wrong, Gran Torino interceded. If All for One confirms a relationship, he'll use it against him. The same could be said about Aunt Inko or anyone else, Maruko pointed out. Izumi blinked at the rabbit hero. Since when did she call Izumi's mother Aunt Inko? Measures have already been taken to protect Mrs. Midoriya, All Might added. Unfortunately, young Uraraka will be an easy target, especially during the internships or once she hits the streets as a pro. Maruko didn't have a response to that. It was far easier to keep an eye on a housewife than a kid training to fight evildoers. Moreover, Midoriya needs to get rid of distractions, especially while he has yet to reach his full potential, Night Eye stated. He means until I can master one for all, translated Izumi. Izumi clenched her fists. So they weren't just asking to pull the burden of the world over his shoulders but also forego what little happiness he had gained. All her life had beeped up until those last few months. Ever since she got into UA everything had gotten a lot better, and Izumi was not about to forego her happiness. No, Izumi said. Night Eye raised an eyebrow, almost daring Izumi to insist. I will not just break up with Ochako, Izumi stated. Even if we split up, my feelings for her won't change and she will remain a target regardless. She has a point, said Maruko with a smirk, and I will not just set her aside, Izumi insisted. I managed to defeat Nomu because I had her help. If it wasn't for Ochako, I would have had a hard time kicking him off to Kingdom Come. We work well together and... She paused and took a deep breath, and I don't think I can do this alone, Izumi said. Night Eye squinted at Izumi, while Gran Torino smirked. Huh, would you look at that? The cute bunny has some fire in her, laughed the old hero. From the corner of her eyes, Izumi didn't miss the way All Might and Maruko smiled proudly at her. Please, don't use the C word, muttered Izumi. Sorry, kid, Gran Torino said with a growing smirk. I make no promises. Absurd, said Night Eye. You wish to waste your time while the fate of the world hangs on the precipice? If the world stands on the precipice after everything All Might has done for it, then I doubt there's much I can do to change it, Izumi countered. Night Eye and Izumi glared at each other. Had it been the old Izuku who had stood there, she knew that she would have squirmed eventually in fear. Izumi, however, had already gone through enough to falter. Maruko, All Might and Gran Torino glanced at the two who maintained their heated silent fight. Seeing as neither Izumi nor Night Eye was going to budge, All Might stepped in, clearing his throat. So what do you say, young Midoriya? All Might said. Are you ready for the task at hand? Izumi clenched her fists and gave a firm nod at the number one hero. I will not fail you, Izumi promised. Alrighty then, Maruko exclaimed with a smirk and cracking her fists. Let's get this party started. Meanwhile, in another mountain, a pair of blondes walked amidst tall grass and rocky landscape on their own. They were Katsuki and Mitsuki Bakugo, and both had been walking for some time. A bit winded down, they stopped, maintaining the same silence since they set out. The two casually looked around, one with a lot of boredom, the other with a grin. What a nice view, huh? Mitsuki commented. Katsuki just grunted, annoyed. Oi, come on. It isn't every day we get to do this, Mitsuki chided. Katsuki just grunted again. Ugh, you're too much like your father, huffed Mitsuki. Katsuki rolled his eyes but wisely decided not to comment on that. So, Mitsuki said, looking around. I guess this is as good a place to have a talk, huh? Katsuki frowned. You dragged me all the way here to talk? Katsuki asked, an eyebrow twitching. Hey, can't a mom ask for some alone time with her son? Harumphed Mitsuki. In Katsuki's opinion, perhaps mothers shouldn't be so frustrating. Then again, he had suspected his mother wanted to talk about something. He had a good guess as to what. Fine, Mitsuki sighed. She plopped down on a rock closer to her son and urged Katsuki to do the same next to her. He, of course, stubbornly refused. Look kid, I just wanted to talk, all right? Mitsuki said. What about? Grunted Katsuki. He mentally rolled his eyes. He already knew what she wanted. It was too damn predictable. After all, what else could she want to talk about? His mother clearly wanted to talk about. Well, I wanted to talk about you for starters, Mitsuki huffed, as if it wasn't obvious enough. As it so happened, Katsuki hadn't expected that. He blinked at her, dumbfounded, before he frowned and decided to sit down on a rock of his own. He was not going to sit like a toddler next to his mother. He scowled at his mother, unwilling to show any sign of confusion. Me? Katsuki huffed. Yeah, you, Mitsuki rolled her eyes. Seriously, son, you went through one hell of an experience last week and you expect me not to ask how you're doing? Admittedly, Katsuki had expected his mother to be very annoying after the USJ. He had been surprised when she had given him time off on his own rather than be a pest, but Katsuki had suspected the other issue had taken all of her attention, as in the fact she was going to pop out another kid. Katsuki was half expecting a talk about being a big brother, not being jealous that both his parents would have to focus on someone else and all that crap. So yeah, shrugged Mitsuki. I just wanted to talk, mother to son, all right? There's nothing to talk about, huffed Katsuki. No, seriously. Mitsuki scoffed. What about facing actual scumbags? How did you react to villains, Katsuki? She took a moment to think about it, only to grow frustrated. I don't know, damn it. I just want to know anything, all right? Are you really doing all right? Do you need something? Just talk to me, darn it. Of course I'm all right. Those villains were nothing. I beat the crap out of them without getting a scratch, retorted Katsuki. Mitsuki blinked. Seriously? You just fought them? You weren't one bit afraid? She asked. Of course not, he insisted. By the look on her face, Katsuki could tell she did not believe him one bit. They were freaking weak, Mom, Katsuki said. They barely knew how to talk, much less fight. They were so pathetic, even the lost my classmates were able to deal with them. However, his words did little to alleviate Mitsuki's feelings. If anything, she looked more worried. So you just went straight up and fought them? Actual villains? Katsuki scowled at her tone of disapproval. You reckless idiot. Your teachers were hospitalized. There clearly were strong ones. Strong enough to beat pros, Mitsuki pointed out. Fine, yeah, there was this one asshole that was one hell of a power freak, Katsuki conceded. But it was just him and I could have taken care of him. Even if he said it with confidence, Katsuki didn't feel so sure about it. That Nomu freak had been one nasty beast with incredible strength. Hell, he actually managed to keep All Might down, the god-freaking #1 hero himself. Could he really have beaten Nomu? If Deku could, then I sure as hell could have beaten the freak, he angrily thought. Yet a tiny voice in his head reminded Katsuki that Midoriya hadn't defeated the Nomu beast on his own, even if he had a power oddly reminiscent to All Might. It had been a unique combo with the round-faced girl that allowed Midoriya to kick Nomu out to the stratosphere and maybe straight to outer space. Unwilling to delve in that topic and refusing to admit that, yeah, Deku did something Katsuki might never have achieved, the explosive blonde decided to change topic. So what? You are starting to get worried I might get hurt, Katsuki harumphed. Hey, excuse me if the reality of your career choice never really hit me, retorted Mitsuki. I've wanted to be a hero since I was a brat, Katsuki pointed out. You and every single kid out there, Mitsuki grunted. And you're still a brat, just so that you know. Katsuki scoffed at that. You know, Katsuki, have you ever really thought it? Mitsuki asked. Thought about what? An irritable Katsuki wondered. About your career choice. Like you said, it has been a dream since you were a toddler. Do you really want to keep at it? Mitsuki wondered. Katsuki rolled his eyes. Of course I want to be a freaking hero. What else am I supposed to be? An accountant. I have a powerful quirk meant for the next #1 hero. What? Am I supposed to waste it? Katsuki snarled. Hey, I am just asking, huffed Mitsuki. Don't think just because you have a super strong quirk all you can be is a hero. You have a good head on your shoulders. You could be a lawyer, or maybe a scientist, or maybe. Like hell I am going to be a pathetic paper pusher, Katsuki spat. Fine, hero it is. Geez, I am just asking, Mitsuki muttered. Seriously, Katsuki, if you want to be a hero you'll need to get your behavior in check. I doubt you'll be too popular with that attitude, if you don't get in trouble later on. Katsuki scoffed dismissively at that. What kind of trouble could she mean? He had been just fine before UA without anyone causing a fuzz. There were a few hiccups after he got into the high school, but that was mostly because he was surrounded by wannabe extras. I mean it, Katsuki. We both know the sort of crap that journos dig up whenever they have a bone to pick with a particular hero, Mitsuki pointed out. Katsuki scowled but didn't say anything. In fact, he was reminded of Deku and how he had managed to blackmail him into being a complying idiot, all because he might have said a couple careless stupid things. As much as it pained him, his mother was right. Katsuki had messed up before UA and there was a lot of stuff that could be used against him. Worse, he could very well mess up again during UA, and the last thing Katsuki wanted was for the pathetic losers of his classmates to have more ammunition against him. Katsuki grinded his teeth. Just thinking about the way Izumi, that goddamn bunny chick, had lorded over him infuriated him to no end. True, some of it was Katsuki's fault. Still, the explosive blonde couldn't help but hate Izumi for blackmailing him like it. He was powerful, stronger than Izumi, in his less than humble opinion, and yet he had been infuriatingly powerless to do anything. The problem was, what could he possibly do? It wasn't like he could change the past or convince anyone that it hadn't been such a big deal. Sadly, when it came to bullying, Katsuki was well aware rarely anyone took the side of the perceived bully, especially not when the one bullied could take an adorable fluffy form everyone appeared to immediately take a shine to. Oi, what's with that face? Mitsuki asked, worried. She raised an eyebrow. Oh no, don't tell me you already messed up. Who did you harm? Or did you run your mouth again? Katsuki wanted to immediately deny it, but memories of Izumi confronting him in the USJ kept his mouth shut and his jaw grinding against his skull. He had to say something, though, but what? If Katsuki revealed the few alleged transgressions against Deku to his mother, he would get grounded to Kingdom Come. Worse, Auntie Inko would probably be angry towards him, and that was something Katsuki really wanted to avoid. At the same time, he really did not want to be in a position where Izumi would have some sort of control over him. Oi, Houston to Katsuki, this is his mom, Mitsuki called, trying to get Katsuki's attention. Spill it, Katsuki. What shit did you do this time? Again, Katsuki's first instinct was to do what he had done throughout his childhood. Deny everything. His tongue, though, remained unmoving. He glared at his mother, annoyed at her persistence and perceptiveness. Fine, might as well get this crap out of the way, Katsuki thought. Even so, he remained unwilling to say anything. The thought of disappointing Auntie Inko made him hesitate, just as much as what he imagined his parents would say. It surprised him he cared so much about the latter, while the former left a sour taste in his mouth. In the end, Katsuki took a deep breath, opened his mouth and pushed forward. Let it be known that Katsuki, for all his flaws, was neither a quitter nor a coward. In the end, relationships could be amended, while being shackled to past mistakes was something that could forever drag him down, and Katsuki had no intention to be dragged down by anything. He wanted to reach the top and he would not be slowed down or stopped by anything, no matter the cost. Mom, Katsuki said. He looked straight into his mother's eyes, who in turn stared back, perplexed by her son's tone and conviction. There's something you need to know about Izuku and me. To her credit, Katsuki didn't need to say more than that for Mitsuki to spew a long string of curses and pinch the bridge of her nose. It was a good thing she had dragged him all the way into the middle of nowhere, because Katsuki would have never dared to utter a word anywhere near human ears, not with what would definitely come out of his mother's mouth. It was going to be a long evening, and Katsuki was sure he was going to regret it. The Usagiyama property was once again filled with activity. The day might have been near its end, with dusk fast approaching, but for the many members of the family there were still hours to play and run around. The younglings were clearly trying to make the best of their time, playing in the open fields either tag or football, while adults hanged around their groups, chatting or playing games of their own. One certain Usagiyama senior, for example, was definitely enjoying a game of poker. Inko and Mitsuki had made friends with many other women. Izuku didn't know what they chatted so fervently about, but he had a good guess. Their sons. He blushed and kept his distance from the matriarchs, for he probably would die of embarrassment from all the stories they probably were sharing. That was, much to his chagrin, the nature of mothers, apparently. Truly, Izuku had enjoyed himself. He had needed a chance to escape his routine, and everything he had learned about his family in the process had helped think about other things. However, he felt the burden of his responsibilities weighing him down still. For all his prompt escape from UA, it seemed the weight of being the next symbol of peace was unescapable. Still, Izuku was all smiles when he finally managed to meet up with Ochako on a secluded spot in the manor. Perhaps it was due to their previous intimate talk in UA, but something made them meet at the manor's rooftop. Thus, while the Usagiyamas enjoyed what was left of Sunday, Izuku watched from above, a smile on his face. At the moment, he felt like staying as Izuku, if only because he had spent too much time as Izumi that day and needed a rest from being a cute bunny girl. That and changing forms definitely helped with his sore muscles. Finally, the door to the rooftop opened and out came the brunette Izuku had been waiting for. He beamed and walked over to her, happy to be alone with her once again. Thinking about their date earlier that day worked wonders to his mood. "Hey, Ochako. What's up?" Izuku called. To his dismay, Ochako looked concerned. Izuku picked up the pace and trotted towards his girlfriend. "Hey Izuku," Ochako replied. "You alright?" Izuku asked. Kind of," Ochako said. "It's been an interesting weekend, hasn't it?" "Definitely," grumbled Izuku. The two tentatively went over the railing, where they got a good view of the Usagiyamas down below. To think Izuku could already name a few of his newly found relatives. He had yet to memorize like 20 or 30 others, at least. "How did it go with Maruko?" Ochako asked, breaking the silence. She might have looked troubled by something, but even then Ochako managed to pull a bright wide grin. Izuku blushed, feeling his heart drumming against his chest. Regardless the form, Ochako would always make him feel the same, especially when she smiled like that. "It was all might," Izuku sighed. "He introduced me to yet more tutors." And what hellish meeting it had been. He had thought Maruko could be a hard ass, but Night Eye and Gran Torino were the epitome of hard ass. Izuku had no idea how All Might came out such a hopeful and committed individual with those two hanging with him. "That bad?" giggled Ochako. Izuku smiled, his face lighting up with a red shade. "What about you?" "I am sorry I left you like that," Izuku mumbled. "It can't be helped," Ochako said dismissively. "Our careers come first, right?" "Yeah," Izuku trailed off. It showed just how great his life had become when being a hero was much less appealing than something else. For his entire life, Izuku had grasped at his near-impossible dream of becoming a hero with such intensity. There had been little room for more in his heart. Yet there he stood, wishing he could be anything other than an aspiring symbol of peace, maybe even a normal teenager with only teenager issues. If only the world was fair. "Izuku?" Ochako called. Yeah? I wanted to." Ochako trailed off, before taking a deep breath. Izuku frowned, confused and concerned. "I wanted to say, sorry," Ochako spluttered. "I really messed up." "Messed up?" Izuku wondered, blinking at the girl. "How?" Ochako sighed. She looked down at her feet, squirming with such guilt and remorse that left Izuku feeling bad by proxy. "I have been unfair to you," Ochako said, eyes averted. She wrung her hands, her face marred with sadness. You went through a lot and I have been selfish. Selfish? No, you are anything but selfish, insisted Izuku. No, Ochako sighed. I was selfish. Izuku scratched his head. When was Ochako ever selfish? I shouldn't have asked to only date you as Izumi, Ochako said. Huh? Izuku was at a loss. Was that what bothered Ochako? Then again, perhaps having to worry about the fate of Hero Society had left him rather numb to ordinary issues. Ochako, it isn't a big deal, mused Izuku with a chuckle. But it is, Ochako exclaimed. You deserve better than that. You deserve being able to be yourself, all of you, to be happy, not just as Izumi. But Ochako, Izuku really wanted to argue, for a deep fear gripped his heart. Did that mean Ochako wanted to break up? No, Izuku couldn't allow that, not after everything he had been through. Especially after standing up against Night Eye. That had been an experience that would haunt Izuku's nightmares. Izuku, Ochako pleaded. The tone alone made Izuku close his mouth. Slowly, Ochako took his hands and held them against her chest, looking rather sad. Izuku wanted to cheer her up, make her happy, but he stood rooted in place instead, attentive and resigned. Do you remember what you told me about your parents having preferred Izumi over Izuku? Ochako asked. Yeah, but that's, the boy started saying. You hated it, Ochako interrupted. And you had good reason to. It wasn't fair. Izuku grimaced. Where was Ochako going with that? You were happy your parents finally got their act together and you have every right to feel like that. You don't deserve for others to ignore one form in favor of other, much less for superficial things, Ochako carried on. But that was different, at least for Izuku. His parents had known him for his entire life and suddenly took a greater liking to the daughter they never had. Ochako, on the other hand, had met and gotten to know Izumi first. Was it fair to ask her to just include a boy she barely knew into the mix? I don't know what your deal with All Might really is, but I know you already have a lot on your shoulders, Izuku. I can't ask for more. If anything, I want to help you any way I can, Ochako explained. Then please, don't, Izuku didn't know whether he could voice his fears. Don't leave me, Izuku mentally begged. Solitude, the mere idea of being a lonely kid once again, gnawed on his very being. He couldn't help but remember being the pariah of his school, of the entire neighborhood. He couldn't go back to that. I ain't leaving you any day soon, mister. Izuku might not be as cute as Izumi, but you aren't going to get rid of me that easily, Ochako resolutely stated. She looked down, ashamed. Unless you want to date a certain blonde American girl. I mean, maybe you could be happier with her than me. Blonde, American, girl. Izuku frowned, unsure who Ochako was alluding to. Wait, have I actually met any American girls? Pondered Izuku. Melissa, Izuku, deadpanned Ochako. Oh, Izuku said, only for his eyes to widen. Wait, Melissa? You think she and I, what? That's crazy. You really got along well together, Ochako muttered, glaring at her feet. As friends? Izuku exclaimed. I doubt we could be anything more than that. By Ochako's pout, she definitely didn't believe him, at all. I mean it, Ochako, she's nice and all, but I don't think we could ever, date? Izuku insisted. Ochako kept her pout fixed on her face. Izuku knew that Ochako was suffering a bout of jealousy. However, he couldn't help but laugh at the girl's expression. She was rather cute. You have a lot in common, mumbled Ochako, and she likes you as Izuku. I barely know her. By All Might, we met yesterday, Ochako. And how would a relationship work? She lives and works in I Island and has no interest on moving to UA, countered Izuku. Ochako didn't look convinced. Besides, she's way too tall for me, Izuku chuckled. She's not that tall, countered Ochako. As Izumi, she's a giant, joked Izuku. Finally, Ochako relented with a smile. Fine, I guess I was a little jealous, grumbled Ochako. A little? Teased Izuku. Ochako glared at Izuku, who chuckled. There was a long pregnant silence between the two, where they averted their eyes unsure how to proceed. What were they even meant to say? That they had started dating in a rush of emotions after a rather stressful event and had barely put much thought into any of it? That they had yet to properly talk about where they stood? that they had acted like hormonal teenagers. "We messed up, huh?" Izuku said. "I did," Ochako corrected. "It isn't your fault. I was the one that insisted on being Izumi. Kind of weird in hindsight, when I just wanted mom and everyone else to acknowledge me as Izuku too," Izuku said. "You wanted to date me and you thought I only wanted Izumi," Ochako said. Izuku stared at Ochako, who grimaced. "And I do kinda feel only attracted to Izumi," Ochako admitted. "But that doesn't mean I should only date half of you." The two stood there, awkwardly avoiding looking into each other. Izuku felt his heart racing, his blood burning with emotions. His mind was clogged with thoughts and fears, and yet, he pressed on. "Would you like to date me?" Izuku asked. "Yes," Ochako finally said. "I want to give it a try, as you this time. Not Izumi, not Izuku, as you, Midoriya, who can be both." Izuku sighed, the weight of all his most recent discussions returning in full strength. Perhaps this was the time to call quits and separate himself from Ochako, allow her to be happier with someone else. However, for the first time in his life, Izuku wanted to be really selfish and stay with Ochako. "You know, maybe you would be happier with someone else," Izuku said. "Maybe, maybe not," Ochako said with a shrug. "We'll never know unless we try, right? And besides, we make one hell of a team, don't we?" Izuku had to admit, they did. "I know you have a lot on your plate, being All Might's son and all that," Ochako teased, earning a scoff from Izuku at the bad joke. "So I want to be there and help you, alright? And hey, who better to help with burdens than me, with my gravity-removing quirk?" Perhaps it was the stress, but Izuku couldn't help it. He burst out laughing. Ochako pouted at him, something that made it all funnier. "Sorry, but that was kind of, cheesy," Izuku chortled. Ochako kept her pout, yet her face lit up with a blush. "So, should we give it another go?" Izuku tentatively asked. Ochako didn't meet Izuku, but she had a small smile on her face. "Maybe," Ochako said. Chocolate eyes finally met emerald ones. "If you want," Ochako added. "Of course I do," Izuku said. He gave a lopsided smile. "I'm happy with you. You're my first friend and, like you said, we make one hell of a team." Ochako smiled and stared straight at Izuku. The boy looked back at her. They remained quiet, eyes locked onto each other. Seconds flew by in silence. Down below, the Usagiyamas enjoyed what was left of the day. Somewhere out there, Mitsuki and Inko were gossiping with fellow mothers. Somewhere else, Katsuki was brooding, fuming after the tongue lashing he got. Up in the mountains, All Might probably was struggling to start a fire, alongside David and Melissa Shield. Then there were Maruko and Z, doing God's knows what, not that Izuku wanted to think what those two were up to. Finally, as if they both grew tired of the silence, they leaned towards each other. Eyes closed, their lips met. Their kiss was neither chaste nor passionate. If anything, it was a display of affection to each other. For a few seconds they kept their lips together, before the two love-struck teenagers leaned back. Hands held together, they looked into each other's eyes. "So, we stick together?" Ochako wondered. "Yeah," softly said Izuku with a nod, "together." There were few who could afford the Golden Heights apartments, especially the suites. One needed money, and a decent enough reputation, to be there. Thankfully, for a family of pro-heroes, the Golden Heights apartments were well within their budgets. One little girl by the name of Aiko Midoriya, however, couldn't care less about that, much less in that particular night. Sneaking her way towards the large kitchen of her home, the little girl poked her head from the door. Her long rabbit ears searched for any noise, while her pink nose twitched, sniffing the air. Finally, she smiled. The coast was clear. That very night, Aiko Midoriya was a girl on a mission. She stealthily traversed the large kitchen, making sure not to make a sound. Her brown furred ears poked out of the kitchen table, all while she tried to locate her target. Finally, her chocolate eyes landed on what she wanted, a jar of cookies. Slowly, and more importantly, quietly, she reached towards it with a paw, and all of a sudden a light was switched on. "And what, may I ask, are you doing?" The little girl froze. Only her little pink nose moved, twitching. Slowly, so very slowly, she turned her head towards the voice. There, standing in all of his muscular might, was her father, the #1 hero and symbol of peace. Izuku Midoriya was by no means intimidating. He wasn't very tall and his emerald eyes exuded a kindness that was only comforting. However, even his eternally gentle gaze had an edge to it, a glimmer of harrowing experiences and fights. Izuku's arms were muscular and well-toned, exposed by his simple white t-shirt. Scars of 100 epic battles could be seen etched on his skin, even across the left side of his face. The little girl said, rooted in place. She quickly hid her paws behind herself and gave her most innocent-looking grin. Hello, Daddy. Izuku smiled. That cute look of yours only works on your mom, Aiko, mused Izuku. The girl pouted. It had been worth a try. After all, even if her father thought otherwise, Aiko was certain she could get her way a couple of times. Her father walked over to her and, much to her annoyance, picked her up. In less than a minute, a grumpy Aiko was carried to her room and placed on her bed, all while her amused father scratched her behind the ear. With her plans for a night snack foiled, all the rabbit girl could do was pout. Aiko was tucked in, but she didn't feel like sleeping and thus decided to change her plans. After her father gave her a peck on her forehead, she quickly grabbed his hand. Daddy, can you stay? The girl asked. You need to sleep, Aiko, Izuku said. Just a bit, the girl pleaded, giving her best begging pout she could muster. You have school tomorrow, Izuku pointed out. Please. I miss Mom, Aiko said. Now Aiko knew she was kind of playing dirty, but Aiko didn't care. She didn't want to go to sleep just yet, much less without a snack. Her father folded his arms, giving her a knowing look. You spend way too much time with Auntie Z, Izuku remarked. Aiko gave her most innocent smile. Fine, relented Izuku. Aiko grinned as his father's form suddenly shifted and, all of a sudden, she was joined on the bed by his father in his rabbit form. Aiko snuggled against Izumi, all while the gray-furred rabbit woman giggled. I guess you won't go to sleep without a story, huh? Izumi said. All right, kiddo, ask away. What story do you want to hear? Aiko tried to think fast. Any story would do. Thus, she said the first one that came to mind. Will you tell me about Shigaraki? Please. I'm old enough to hear the full story, she begged. Izumi scowled and shook her head. That's a story for another time, Izumi said. Come on, Aiko, think, there must be a story to keep Dad around, the little rabbit girl thought. Suddenly, a thought came to her. Her father had told her many stories before, but there were a few he had never shared, mostly because Aiko never asked. Aiko grinned, feeling like a genius. Will you tell me about the time you met Mom? Asked Aiko. Izumi was surprised by that. She frowned, confused. We never told you about that day, now did we? Izumi realized. Nope, innocently replied Aiko. In other words, the story was perfect to keep her father going. Izumi hummed, thoughtful. Are you sure you want to hear that one? There are a lot of other more interesting tales, like my first sports festival, the time I fought Stain the hero killer, or the one time I saved Eri from the Yakuza before she was adopted by Rumi and Z, Izumi hummed. Eri was saved from the Yakuza? Aiko asked, wide-eyed. Maybe that's a story for when you were old. That tales is rather dark for a child, mumbled Izumi. Aiko pouted. She hated when she was treated like a little bunny. She was 5 for heaven's sake. She could hear all of the darker stories, especially since she was going to be the next #1 hero. However, before the pair could decide on a story, their ears perked up and snapped their heads towards the door. It sounded as if someone was unlocking the front door. Could it be? Aiko gasped. Both Izumi and Aiko hopped out of their beds into the living room, where the lights had been switched on. How's my little boy? Cooed a familiar voice. Mom, Aiko exclaimed. No sooner had the little rabbit girl spotted the woman in question, she shot straight towards her. To her credit, Ochako Uraraka, still dressed in her skin-clad black hero costume, caught the child with one arm with ease. The other child, though, didn't appreciate the movement and glared at his older sister. Having already rushed to greet her mother, Aiko squinted at her little brother Isamu. Isamu Midoriya was a little toddler with messy dark green hair and bright amethyst eyes. Admittedly, although he lacked any rabbit features, he was way too cute to be legal. In fact, Aiko was sure such cuteness was illegal somewhere. His little pink blushes on his cheeks, much like her mother's, only enhanced his cuteness. Well, Aiko wasn't sure if he counted as her brother per se, since instead of Izuku being his dad, Izumi was Isamu's mom and Aiko's mom was Isamu's dad, somehow. Once again, Aiko hated being treated like a little child and never given a full explanation. How or why it happened had been, like the all-juicy and better stories, saved up until Aiko was old. In any case, it didn't matter. The Midoriyas were finally all together and that meant one thing: staying up late. Izumi hopped over to her family and kissed her wife. Aiko didn't make a peep, grinning wide. "And what are you doing fully awake, young lady?" Ochako asked. Mom, Daddy was about to tell us the day you met for the first time," Aiko said. Ochako gave Izumi a curious look, who in turn smiled and shrugged. "Was he now?" Ochako hummed. "We might as well tell her. I don't think she will willingly try to sleep otherwise and her plans get crazier when she doesn't get her way," Izumi pointed out. Aiko scowled. Damn, she had been found out. Of course, Ochako huffed. She has too much of her father. Thankfully, Ochako and Izumi didn't mind staying together with their children in the living room. They plopped down on the sofa, their children snuggled against them. Aiko loved the moment, especially now that they were all together. Better yet, she was about to hear an entirely new story. Where should we begin? Ochako wondered. Oh, I know, Izumi said with a smirk. It happened at the entrance exam. Exam? Little Isamu asked. Aiko rolled her eyes as her parents tried to explain her baby brother what an exam was. Thankfully, Isamu nodded, even if he didn't understand. Without another interruption, Izumi carried on. She cleared her throat, a smirk in place. Let's start from the beginning, shall we? Izumi said. Aiko and Isamu eagerly nodded, already enraptured by the tale. Ochako giggled all while Izumi finally started narrating. The most powerful and incredible people did not come from anywhere. Many had been forged within the walls of Ua, the high school. And so, Izumi carried on with her tale, the story in which she discovered she had another quirk, a story in which she met her future wife and later on her first ever nemesis. It was the story of Izuku and Izumi Midoriya, or as Ochako would love to tease Izuku with, the story about their Rabbit Hero Academia. To be continued. I hope you enjoyed this story. Also remember to subscribe and like this video. See you in the next video.